So today, we're going to talk about a story that I'm sure you've heard of. It's a story of ambition so big, so grand, that the result was a ship they called Unsinkable. But it's also a tragedy, one born from a whole cascade of really terrible mistakes. Yep, we are exploring the legendary and truly heartbreaking story of the Titanic.
And right off the bat, our source for this explainer, Muhammad Abdallah's Case Studies for Young Learners, just cuts right through all the myths. It sets this incredibly powerful tone with one simple, almost chilling statement. Let the truth be known. No ship is unsinkable.
I want you to just try and picture the scene for a second. It's Southampton Port. There's this massive crowd of people, and they are just completely astonished by what they're seeing. The biggest, most incredible ship of its time. The source actually calls it a man-made moving island, all set to head out on its very first trip. The air is just filled with excitement.
And on board this incredible ship, 2,224 souls. You've got passengers, you've got crew, and every single one of them is so proud to be part of this historic journey to America. Of course, they have absolutely no idea what's waiting for them out there in the icy water.
But that's where the story takes a turn. That hopeful, exciting beginning, it gives way to a story of human error. And this wasn't just one single accident, you know? It was a chain reaction, a whole cascade of fatal misjudgments that turned this absolute dream voyage into a complete nightmare. So let's break down exactly how it all went so wrong. The path to disaster was really paved with three huge mistakes. First, a totally reckless obsession with speed. Second, just carelessly ignoring some very clear warnings. And third, a pretty shocking lack of basic, essential equipment.
The very first link in that tragic chain was ambition. The captain, well, he was determined to set a brand new speed record for crossing the Atlantic. As our source puts it, he recklessly gave orders to the sailors to drive the ship at its full speed. And that brings us to the second fatal mistake, just plain overconfidence. The ship got multiple warnings from other ships out there about drifting ice. But the captain, he seemed to believe the Titanic was just too massive, too gigantic to be in any real danger, so he just ignored them. And this leads to the third mistake, and honestly, this one is maybe the most frustrating of all. The lookout, the guy who was the first to spot the iceberg, didn't have any binoculars. Just think about that. Our source points out that with that one simple piece of equipment, he could have seen the danger just a little bit sooner. And maybe, just maybe, that would have given them the precious few seconds they needed to change everything.
So, with all those mistakes piling up, the stage was set for an absolute tragedy. Now we shift to the moment of impact, the collision that didn't just break the ship, but shattered the whole myth of the unsinkable ship, and kicked off its final terrifying hours.
After 3 days of sailing at full speed, it all happened in the blink of an eye. Right before midnight, the lookout finally saw it, an iceberg, dead ahead. The order was given to turn, to try and steer around it, but it was just too late. Seconds later, the Titanic hit the ice.
Okay, so here's a really crucial point. Even after hitting the iceberg, this massive loss of life, it wasn't a sure thing yet. The disaster was about to get infinitely worse because of what the source calls incomprehensible wrong decisions. The first mistakes were bad enough, but they were about to be followed by even more failures.
And the most shocking of these failures had to be the lifeboats. Get this, there were 2,224 people on the ship, but the lifeboats could only hold 1,178. I mean, that gap is just tragically clear. The total number of souls on board versus the number of available seats. It's barely more than half. The ship was never, ever equipped to save everyone. It was impossible from the start.
And then, as if it couldn't get any worse, came the final, heartbreaking mistake. The ship is sinking, there aren't enough lifeboats, the last hope is a quick rescue. But that call for help, it was about to be tragically missed.
They were sending out distress signals, using the wireless, using lamps, anything they could. And there was a ship close enough to actually help in time, but it never got the message. And the reason, it's just a cruel twist of fate. The wireless operator on that nearby ship had fallen asleep. The first rescue ship didn't get there until around 4 a.m. By then, it was far, far too late. 1,500 passengers and crew had already drowned in the freezing cold of the Atlantic Ocean. It's just a devastating, unimaginable loss of life.
So as we wrap this up, it's so important to understand that the sinking of the Titanic wasn't just some unfortunate accident. It was a preventable tragedy.
And its story serves as this profound, timeless lesson learned from the depths of the ocean.
You know, if you had to boil this whole disaster down to one single word, it would be this: hubris. It's that excessive pride, that overconfidence that leads to a reckless disregard for clear and present danger. The belief that the Titanic was unsinkable, well, that turned out to be its most fatal flaw. Our source really doesn't mince words in its final summary. It concludes that the Titanic sadly sank as a result of serious, silly, ridiculous mistakes. Not a perfect storm, not an act of fate, but a series of human blunders.
And this really captures that final haunting takeaway. This whole tragedy could have been avoided at so many different points. If the captain hadn't been so obsessed with speed, if the warnings had been taken seriously, if there were enough lifeboats, if that wireless operator had just been awake, the outcome could have been so different if only a little more care had been given.
Which leaves us all with this final, really haunting question. The story of the Titanic is this powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest catastrophes aren't caused by one single massive failure, but by a whole chain of small, seemingly insignificant mistakes. So how many does it take?